As a first responder at the scene of a hazardous materials incident, you must obtain specific information about any material involved in the incident as soon as possible. Many reference texts and organizations can provide response personnel with technical data and physical assistance regarding both the hazards associated with an incident and methods to deal with these hazards. Some of those texts are Facility Emergency Response Plans, Spill Prevention Control and Countermeasure, or SPCC plans, the National Fire Protection Association, or NFPA 704 system, the Department of Transportation's Emergency Response Guidebook. Material safety data sheets and shipping documents are immediate sources of information in an emergency. Emergency Response Plans. Each facility should have a comprehensive written facility emergency response plan which observes the following priorities. The safety of on-site personnel must not be compromised. The safety of others at or near the scene must be ensured. The environment must be safeguarded, and property must be protected. Each facility emergency response plan must be workable, suitable for the area to be covered, and whenever possible involve local officials. It must be prepared in advance and must be written. All personnel involved must be familiar with the plan. Practice drills are the way to train those involved in emergency response activities. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, has issued a standard specifically developed to protect workers in a hazardous materials environment and to help them handle hazardous waste safely and effectively. This regulation is found in 29 CFR 1910.120, and it deals with hazardous waste operations and emergency response, or HAZWOPER. This standard requires that each employer develop and implement a written facility emergency response plan to handle possible emergencies. The plan must include, number 1, personnel roles, lines of authority, and communication procedures. Number 2, pre-emergency planning. Number 3, emergency recognition and prevention. Number 4, emergency medical and first aid treatment. Number 5, methods or procedures for alerting on-site employees. 6, safe distances and places of refuge. Number 7, site security and control. 8, critique of response and follow-up. Number 9, personal protective and emergency equipment. Number 10, evacuation routes and procedures. 11, site topography, layout, and prevailing weather conditions. 12, procedures for reporting incidents to local, state, and federal government agencies. 13, procedures must be integrated into the disaster, fire, and/or emergency response plans of the site's nearest local, state, and federal agencies. 14, the plan requirements must be rehearsed regularly, reviewed periodically, and updated as necessary. 15, a distinguishable alarm system must be in operation to alert employees of emergencies. And 16, the emergency plan must be available for inspection by employees, employee representatives, OSHA, and EPA officials, and other federal agencies. Spill Prevention Control and Countermeasures, or SPCC plans. Any facility with above-ground petroleum storage tanks that could possibly discharge oil into navigable waters or adjoining shorelines is required to have an SPCC plan. SPCC plans are approved by a professional engineer and must be regularly updated by each facility. The information contained in an SPCC plan is different for each facility. Typically, the plan provides a physical description of the facility, including a map and plot plan. Data concerning drainage tanks and supply lines are included. The contingency plan section of the SPCC plan is an excellent source of information in an emergency. This section identifies areas with the greatest spill potential. Such areas might include tank farms, load racks, tank car racks, dock areas, or pipelines. SPCC plans provide at least the following information: stopping the flow of product, containment procedures, and emergency telephone numbers. The NFPA 704 Identification System. A rapid source of information about a product or chemical in an emergency is the National Fire Protection Association's, or NFPA 704 system. This highly visible system uses a combination of numbers arranged against a background of colors, blue, red, yellow, and white, to identify the degree of physical hazard presented by chemicals. Typically, NFPA placards may be found on buildings or tanks containing hazardous materials. The blue diamond represents the degree of toxicity or health hazard posed by the material. Red represents the degree to which the material is susceptible to burning. Yellow describes the tendency of the material to release energy, or to burn or explode by itself or in combination with water or air. The white area is reserved for special information about the material, such as use no water, which is represented by the symbol W. There should always be a number in the blue, red, or yellow diamonds indicating the degree of hazard. The white diamond will contain a symbol only if it is necessary to communicate a special characteristic about the material. Health, or blue. In general, health hazards is a single exposure which may vary from a few seconds up to an hour. The physical exertion demanded in emergency conditions may intensify the effects of any exposure. Numbers from 4 to 0 designate hazards ranging from extreme to insignificant. The number 4. Materials too dangerous to health to expose emergency responders. A few whiffs of the vapor would cause death, or the vapor or liquid could be fatal on penetrating the responder's normal full protective clothing. Level A chemical protective clothing and breathing apparatus provide adequate protection against inhalation or skin contact with these materials. The number 3. Materials extremely hazardous to health, but areas may be entered with extreme care. Full protective clothing, including self-contained breathing apparatus, coat, pants, gloves, boots, and bands around legs, arms, and waist should be provided. No skin surface should be exposed. The number 2. Materials hazardous to health, but areas may be entered with full-faced mask, self-contained breathing apparatus which provides eye protection for cleaning large spills or entering a confined space. The number 1. Materials only slightly hazardous to health. It may be desirable to wear self-contained breathing apparatus for cleaning large spills or entering a confined space. And the number 0. Materials which on exposure would offer no hazard beyond that of ordinary combustible materials. Flammability, or red. Ignitability is the basis for assigning degrees within this category. The number 4. Very flammable gases or very volatile flammable liquids. Shut off flow and keep cooling water streams on exposed tanks or containers. The number 3. Materials which can be ignited under almost all normal temperature conditions. Water may be ineffective because of the low flash point. The number 2. Materials which must be moderately heated before ignition will occur. Water spray may be used to extinguish the fire because the material can be cooled below its flash point. The number 1. Materials that must be preheated before ignition can occur. Water may cause frothing if it gets below the surface of the liquid and turns to steam. However, water fog gently applied to the surface will cause a frothing which will extinguish the fire. And the number 0. Materials that will not burn. Reactivity or stability, the color yellow. The assignment of degrees in the reactivity category is based upon the susceptibility of materials to release energy either by themselves or in combination with water, air, or other substances. The number 4. Materials which, in themselves, are readily capable of detonation, explosive decomposition, or explosive reaction at normal temperatures and pressures. Includes materials which are sensitive to mechanical or localized thermal shock. If a chemical with this hazard rating is in an advanced or massive fire, the area should be evacuated. The number 3, materials which in themselves are capable of detonation, explosive decomposition, or explosive reaction. Such materials require a strong initiating source, which must be heated under confinement before initiation. Includes materials which are sensitive to thermal or mechanical shock at elevated temperatures and pressures, or which react explosively with water without requiring heat or confinement. The number 2, materials which in themselves are normally unstable and readily undergo violent chemical change, but do not detonate. Includes material which can undergo chemical change with rapid release of energy at normal temperatures and pressures, or which can undergo violent chemical change at elevated temperatures and pressures. Also includes those materials which may react violently with water, or which may form potentially explosive mixtures with water. The number 1, materials which in themselves are normally stable, but which may become unstable at elevated temperatures and pressures, or which may react with some release of energy, but not violently. And the number 0, materials which in themselves are normally stable, even under fire exposure conditions, and which are not reactive with water. The Emergency Response Guidebook. This orange guidebook was developed by the U.S. Department of Transportation for use by first responders. It is a guide for initial action to be taken to protect responders and the general public when called upon to handle incidents involving hazardous materials. The information is for guidance, primarily during the initial phases of an incident. To obtain additional assistance about the most effective handling of such an incident, it is important that responders call as soon as possible their terminal manager or terminal supervisor. Emergency telephone numbers may be found in Facility Emergency Response Plans or Spill Prevention Control and Countermeasure SPCC Plan. The Emergency Response Guidebook can assist emergency responders in making decisions. It does this by providing hazard and isolation information about chemicals. The guidebook contains brief information which should be used to supplement information contained in the Facility Emergency Response Plans and SPCCs. The recommendations contained in the Emergency Response Guidebook are those most likely to apply in the majority of cases, but may not be applicable in all cases. Material Safety Data Sheets, or MSDS. They contain the following information. Number 1, the manufacturer's name, address, telephone number, and date of preparation, as well as date of last revision. Number 2, the name and chemical identity of all hazardous components, including common names. Number 3, the threshold limit, TLV, and the OSHA permissible exposure limit, PEL. Number 4, chemical and physical properties such as vapor pressure, vapor density, boiling point, odor, and appearance. Number 5, pertinent fire and explosion data including flash point. 6, reactivity. Number 7, health hazard data such as routes of entry, carcinogenicity, acute and chronic exposure information, signs and symptoms of exposure, pre-existing medical conditions that could be complicated by exposure, and emergency first aid procedures. Number 8, personnel health and safety measures such as respiratory protection, eye protection, protective clothing, ventilation, and other equipment. And number 9, safe handling procedures, including cleanup precautions for spills, leaks, and waste disposal methods. Shipping documents. Shipping documents can provide significant product information in an emergency. Drivers of vehicles in which hazardous materials are transported are required to carry a document containing instructions on procedures to follow in the event of an accident. The documents must include the names and telephone numbers of persons to be contacted in an emergency, the nature of the material being transported, and the precautions to be taken in emergencies, such as fires, accident, or leakage. There are a variety of information sources and response assistance available. Planning and training are the keys to successful operations in the event of an emergency.
Education and training goes a long way to protect yourself, the environment, and your fellow employees. HAZWOPER training is extremely important, so take it seriously. If you have any questions, please ask your trainer or supervisor, because it's just too important to take chances. Thank you.